They didn't leave. They just stopped arriving. And you only noticed when the warmth was already gone. Their replies get shorter. Their tone shifts just enough to make you pause. And suddenly, you're left wondering what you did wrong. Even if nothing obvious happened, what makes it worse is the silence. No argument, no clear ending, just distance. And your brain can't tolerate that. Because when something changes without explanation, you start creating one. You replay conversations. You scan for hidden meaning. You question yourself in ways you never did before. Think about someone in your life right now who feels slightly different. Not gone, just less present. When did that start? But here's the uncomfortable truth. People rarely become cold for no reason. They become cold when something inside them changes, and they choose not to bring you into it. That shift is quiet, almost invisible, because most people don't walk away loudly. They withdraw in a way that feels almost polite. It avoids confrontation. It looks harmless from the outside, but psychologically, it's far more unsettling, because distance isn't really about space, it's about disconnection. And once that disconnection begins, everything starts to feel off. You can say the same things, show up the same way, but it no longer lands the same, because in their mind, something has already ended. The first thing to understand is this: people don't become distant overnight. They become distant internally long before it shows up externally. There's always a gap between what someone feels and what they reveal. And during that gap, they're already pulling away while still acting normal. That's why it feels sudden to you, because you're seeing the outcome, not the process. At some point, something shifted. They started holding things back, responding with less energy, being present, but not really engaged. But they didn't say anything, because saying it would force clarity, and clarity can create conflict. So instead, they fade. And fading is easier than explaining. But why does that shift happen? Sometimes it begins with quiet disappointment. Not loud enough to start a fight. Not clear enough to address directly. Just a subtle feeling that something didn't meet an expectation. An expectation you didn't even know existed. And once that expectation breaks, the way they see you changes. They don't always bring it up, because part of them feels like they shouldn't have to. So instead of communicating, they adjust their behavior, and you're left confused. Because from your side, nothing changed. But from theirs, something did, and they've already responded to it. Other times, it's emotional fatigue. People don't always leave because of one big moment. They leave because of small patterns that repeat quietly over time. Conversations that feel slightly one-sided. Effort that feels just a bit uneven. Moments where they don't feel fully seen or understood. Individually, these things seem manageable, but over time, they accumulate, and eventually, the effort starts to feel heavier than the connection itself. So they stop investing the same way. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just less. Less energy, less curiosity, less intention. And what you see as coldness is often just someone detaching to protect their own energy. Then there's a deeper layer. Sometimes the distance has very little to do with you. It comes from something unresolved within them. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of losing control, fear of needing someone more than they're comfortable admitting. Closeness exposes things people would rather keep hidden. Insecurity, doubt, uncertainty about who they are or what they want. And instead of facing that, they create space, because distance gives them control. It lets them decide when to engage, how much to reveal, how close you're allowed to get. And control feels safer than vulnerability because vulnerability requires honesty, and honesty requires risk. So even if they care about you, they still choose distance. Not because they don't feel anything, but because they feel too much in ways they don't understand. Sometimes distance is not rejection, it's avoidance wearing a calm face. And that's what makes it confusing. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Sometimes people become cold because they've already moved on, not always to another person. Sometimes to a different version of themselves. A new mindset, new priorities, a new direction that no longer aligns with who you were to them. And once that internal shift happens, the connection starts to feel out of place. It's not that you did something wrong, it's that you no longer fit the same role in their life. But instead of explaining that, they distance themselves. Because explaining would require honesty, and honesty can feel like causing unnecessary pain. So they say less. And over time, that silence says everything. Now here's the part most people struggle with. When someone becomes distant, your instinct is to move closer, to fix it, to understand it, to restore what was there. But that instinct often backfires because distance creates tension, and when you chase, you increase that tension. You ask more questions, look for reassurance, pay attention to every shift in tone or timing, and the more you do that, the more pressure they feel, which pushes them further away. It turns into a quiet cycle. You reach out, they pull back, and over time, the gap widens. This is why distance feels so heavy, because it's not just about losing someone, it's about losing certainty, not knowing what changed, not knowing where you stand, not knowing if anything can bring it back, and your mind keeps searching for clarity. But sometimes, clarity isn't something they're willing to give, because the real answer is simple. They chose distance, whether consciously or not. And once that choice is made, closeness can't be forced back into place. You can rebuild something new, but you can't recreate what existed before, because connection isn't just about presence, it's about intention. And you can't rebuild connection with someone who has already withdrawn theirs. You can feel it in the way they respond, in the way they show up, in the way something once natural now feels effortful. Even if they're still there, they're not fully there, and that's what lingers. Not the absence, but the partial presence, the version of them that stays just enough, but not enough to feel real. So what do you do with that? You stop trying to decode every detail, because overanalyzing doesn't create clarity. It deepens confusion. You stop assuming everything is your fault, because not every shift is something you caused. And most importantly, you start paying attention to behavior over explanation. Because when someone becomes distant, their actions become the most honest thing about them. Not what they say, not what they promise, but what they consistently choose to do. Do they show up? Do they engage? Do they meet you halfway? Or do they keep you at a distance while giving just enough to keep you uncertain? Because some people don't fully leave. They stay just close enough to not lose you, but far enough to avoid real connection. And that space is where confusion survives, where hope keeps resetting itself, where you keep waiting for something that already changed. But here's the truth most people realize too late. Distance doesn't always mean the end, but it always means something has already shifted. And once that shift happens, the dynamic is no longer the same. You can build something different, but you can't return to what it was, because what felt natural before now requires effort. And maybe the hardest part to accept is this: people don't suddenly become cold. They slowly disconnect. And you only notice when the warmth is already gone.